When I saw that the latest production at the Almeida Theatre has Anya Chalotra, who plays Yennefer in the popular Netflix series, on the bill, I didn't think twice. I booked a ticket and went to see the show. However, what I didn't know is that this show would captivate me in a few different ways. Let me tell you more about Cold War. This musical is an adaptation of the movie by the same name, directed by Paweł Pawlikowski, and the story is very much based around two protagonists, Zula and Victor, who are members of this ensemble which performs Polish traditional folk music and dances. That's where they meet, that's how their story starts. The story is set in post-war Poland, so after the Second World War, in a communist environment, and it is just interesting story to see not only the development of love and friendship between these two key characters, but also how things have developed in Poland after the Second World War. Now let's dive into the things that I found the most impressive about this show. But before I do that, don't forget to subscribe if you like this content, because I'm trying to hit my 1,000 subscribers on YouTube and I would really appreciate your help. The first thing that you need to know about this show is that this isn't your typical musical. Yes, there are dancing and singing numbers, however, it is all very subtle, real, and just a bit more weaved into the storyline and the feel of the dialogue, which makes it so natural to follow these songs and dances, because it's not just out of the blue the character starts singing. It is kind of part of the narrative in a much more subtle way than you normally experience on the West End. So if you aren't into that West End glitzy kind of musicals, then this might be a musical suited more for you. Probably the most interesting part about this show is introducing you to Polish culture and music. It is not something that I've got to see on the West End previously, and personally I'm not as familiar with, so it was a really nice show to go and see and actually learn something new and hear completely different sounds, because Polish folklore music is quite different to American musicals and British musicals. The story is very much centered around music, because Zula is a performer and Victor is a pianist. So it is all about their creative process and how they interact while also being in love with each other and at the same time partners in terms of the work they do with the ensemble. The story really drives that narrative about the purpose of music and purpose of art, because the music and what the ensemble gets to perform is at some point very much influenced by the communist government, who wants to use music to spread their message. So it's not only a love story, but it is a story about how art and culture can be compromised to suit the regime at the time. There are quite a few songs that are sung in Polish, however there are some that are translated in English, so it is easy to follow. When it comes to the set, this isn't a show that will blow you away with amazing effects and big set changes, but at the same time it uses really well the space at Almeida Theatre, because this is a fairly small theatre and there's a limited space on stage and everything feels very intimate, but the set solutions made it feel like the whole theatre is in some way immersed in the set, because at some points there are actors who are walking through the audience to get to the stage, at some point they're just sitting at the edge of the stage, so at times it feels like you are an extended part of their ensemble. When it comes to choreography, it is a central piece of the show because it incorporates traditional Polish dances and costumes, and since the storyline follows the ensemble who is anyway performing traditional dances, it was almost impossible to kind of not make dancing very central part of the narrative and the show. As mentioned before, Almeida Theatre is fairly small. It can only fit 325 people, so the feel of that intimacy and closeness to the cast members is inevitable, which is something that I really liked. And bear in mind that I was actually sitting in the stall's very last row, so I believe row K. It still felt very close to me and I had a pretty decent view, although this has been marked as a restricted view seat. There was no restriction or whatsoever. Personally, I really enjoyed that. This was my first time at Almeida Theatre, but I will definitely make sure to check other productions there. This theatre is known to have really good productions throughout the whole year, so I 100% recommend to you to check it out if you haven't. It is based in North London, so it's not going to to be the Western Theatre, which in some cases it's much nicer because you kind of avoid the crowds in central London. Overall, I did enjoy this show. It felt different, real, and the theatre made it very intimate. It gave me a little bit of Romeo and Juliet vibes, and that is something that you might like or dislike, but I do think that the most thought-provoking part of the show was the cultural element, being immersed in my case, a culture that I'm not familiar with, and then putting that all in the context of the communist Poland. It just reminded me how much music and art can be influenced by the politics, and that added that level of heaviness to the show. So it's not only a love story, but it's also a story about society. It's a snapshot of Europe at the time, and I really found that the most interesting part of the show. I don't think that this is the most mind-bending production that I've seen, and I would probably rate it 3 out of 5 stars, but I do think that it's definitely worth checking out, and that the cast is great, and Anya's performance is definitely worth seeing. So if this sounds like something you would enjoy, then make sure to go and see it before it closes. However, if this wasn't exactly what you were looking for, then maybe one of these shows you might like.